All right. Got it.
Morning. Good
Good
morning.
morning. Good
Morning.
morning, everybody. We have some, I don't know if I have that. Okay, erase is I don't have the paper. So, Bill, can you tell it? The organization,
Erace was founded in 1994, I think.
94.
Three.
Uh,
Three.
And it's designed to promote open and
Conversation.
frank discussions about the issue of racism and with respect and dignity to everyone. And you want to go with the instructions, Cindy?
Yeah, because I don't know it. Sorry about that.
Do you want me to do it?
Sure.
Okay. So first of all, Cindy's going to keep the list. And if you
Yes.
want to get on the list to speak, you raise one finger and we ask that you move it back and forth slowly. Make sure it's seen on the screen that you're looking at, because it's hard to see movement on the screen sometimes. And if you go too fast, it's just going to be like, and then if the person speaking has a clarifying question, you want to put up two fingers and move them slowly. And that is the time where if the speaker has said something that you don't understand, you can ask them to clarify it, like a word or an idea, or you want them to repeat a book title, something like that. It's not a time to mount a
Introduce
counter
them.
argument by
Right.
a question. And Cindy will shut you down, won't you, Cindy?
I will do my best.
And so we do try to maintain a atmosphere of safety. There is no disrespect, no name calling. Part of that atmosphere of respect is that everyone stays muted until they're called on to speak, and then unmute yourself before you speak. Hi, Michelle and Pedro and Marva, Beatrice. And if you have, there will be about 20 to 15 minutes before the end, depending on how many people we ultimately have. There'll be a final go round, and Cindy will give people 2 minutes who have not spoken at all during the meeting, and everyone else gets 1 minute for their final wrap up thoughts. And we are recording until at the end where we get to announcements, and then I'll stop and make announcements. Is that good? Anything I forgot?
Think so.
Okay.
Thank you for being me. You did a good job. Sorry, I didn't have the paper. I'll have to acquire it. So the topic today it came out of long time concern for wanting the issue of racism to be out there where we talk about it. Because I think that's a good way to at least understand more of our own feelings and our peers' feelings. I grew up in North Carolina, which turns out to be one of the most racist states in the country. Maybe there are quite a few of them, but North Carolina is certainly up there. What? Anyway, so I also am a teacher and have been in the classroom for about 40 couple of years. So how do you deal with this in the classroom? Now, I taught kindergarten, so it's, for me, so simple to talk with the kids about it because it's real and it's out there, it's around us. So I chose this article. It's set in Texas, which, boy, I'm glad I don't live in Texas. Very strict rules about teachers and what they can say. I probably would have lost my job, but I felt it was worth putting the topic out there. And then I'll start the list and we'll see what's what.
Cindy, do you want to have people introduce themselves? I forgot to.
I was going to go there. Thank you, especially the new people, because we have about a bunch of new people today, which is wonderful. We're glad you joined us. I'm an old person. I've been here I'm Cindy Morse. I've been a member of Erace about 5 years now, maybe 4. but I certainly enjoy it. I've learned a great deal. So let's go. Phyllis, you go first, and then I'll call names to go around the list.
Hi, I'm Phyllis. I've been coming to Erace meetings since 2008 when I moved to New Orleans. Looking forward to this discussion.
Thank you. Jenny?
Hi, this is my first Erace meeting. I'm familiar with Eracism. My bumper sticker, I can't tell you how many people, what's racism? I'm like, oh God, y'all really? Anyway, and I am in Texas. I'm in Austin. So I also
you.
look forward to the discussion.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah,
How did you find out about it? Did you?
from Michelle.
Okay, neat. Thanks, Michelle, for bringing more people. Okay. Dee Dee. Again, another newbie.
I'm not that new.
Oh, okay.
I've been to this Erace meeting. This is probably my third or fourth one.
Okay.
I originally got introduced to Eracism in the Atlanta group. And then when the pandemic came along and Eracism showed up on Zoom, I was like, oh, I'm in Happy City now. I can go to two of them. And
Nice.
so I totally enjoyed this group. But I also like the Atlanta group also. And it's just nice to meet with folks that have open minds and are willing to challenge things that other people aren't going to challenge.
Nice. Yes. Thank you for joining us. Kate, would you introduce yourself, please?
Good morning. I'm Kate Robinson. This is my first year with Erace, and I was introduced to Erace by Marva. And I look forward to the discussion today.
Super. Thank you. Lynn?
Good morning. I'm Lynn Frank. I live in New Orleans. I have lived here since 1970, but I spent most of my childhood in Houston, Texas. But Texas has changed since I left. I'm so happy to see everyone from near and far. And I've been a member for about 2 years now, since summer of 2019.
Thank you, Lynn. Charlotte and Jim, another set of people I don't know. Welcome.
We're in Atlanta, and we have members of Our Lady of Lourdes Church for about 9 years. But the reason that we're involved with Erace is with this young lady down two views from us, Bisou Blay. And we have been happy to participate in these over the past year. It's lovely to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Bill.
I'm Bill Ives. I'm Cindy's husband, and I've been enjoying Erace for about 4 or 5 years, and I always learn something new every time. So looking forward to this.
Thank you. Marva. You're muted, Marva.
Hi, my name is Marva, and I've been coming to Erace post Katrina. And like Bill says, I learn something every weekend that we meet.
Thank you. Pedro.
Hey, sorry, I was asleep at the wheel here. I'm in Austin and been coming to Erace for a little over a year, and I wanted to just welcome all the Atlanta friends and forewarn them that the Astros are going to win the next 3 games in a row to win the World Series. Anyhow, I adore these meetings and look forward to the meeting today. Thank you.
Okay. Michelle,
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me?
yes.
Okay. My microphone sometimes doesn't work. Yeah, I'm Michelle, and I've been coming to Erace a little over a year, same time around when Pedro started. I enjoy the meetings very much. I'm only going to be able to spend a short time on the meeting. Unfortunately, this morning I have other plans, so I may be jumping off, but I do enjoy it, and I hopefully will be here next weekend for a longer time. So thank you.
Thanks for joining us. Beatrice, good morning.
Hi, good morning. I'm Beatrice. I'm here in East Point. I started coming to Erace in New Orleans, my hometown, in 1994. And I'm co-founder with my late husband, Larry, of Erace Atlanta. And so glad to see our Dee Dee out from California, Charlotte and Jim from Atlanta area, and Jean from other member from Maryland. So good morning, everybody. Glad to be with you.
Super. Thank you. Jean.
Yes, I'm Jean Walker in Silver Spring, Maryland. And I've been coming to Erace in Atlanta. I guess it was pre-pandemic, I know, or at least at the time when we started the Zoom meetings, I may have been able to start then. And then Beatrice told me about Erace New Orleans, and I've been coming for several months. I enjoy the open dialogue, and I always benefit from our dialogues, our conversations together. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jean. Leonetta.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I've been a member of Erace since I did my internship with this organization when I was working on my undergrad. And Beatrice, I miss you. It's nice to see you.
Thank you, Leonetta. Marla.
Hey, good morning, everybody. My name is Marla Burke, and I'm in the New Orleans area. I've been coming to Erace for, I think, about a year off and on. Some weekends are definitely easier than others, but I'm always happy to be here and hear what everybody has to say and all the different perspectives. So much to be gained from that. Good morning. Yay, we have a lot of people.
It's a big crowd. I like it, and much more geographically diverse than usual. I think that's a strength, and that's a good thing that we happen to be on Zoom. So I'm glad you're all here from all over the country. That's exciting. I'm missing Glenn.
Greer. And Greer
Greer.
is waited to be let in, I think.
Okay.
Good morning.
There he
Abdul.
is.
And I've been coming to Erace since 1994. And I find it very interesting. That's why I'm still with it. Thank you.
We're glad you're here, Glenn. I've been missing, gosh, I've lost his name. Amal. Does anyone know if he's traveling, if he's around, if he's sick?
I emailed him all a few weeks ago, and he said he and his family were someplace without internet. And I don't know if it was a post-Ida situation. He didn't go into details, but he's well
Okay.
otherwise.
I'm glad he's well. I'm sorry. I would love, maybe it exists and I just don't know, a list of people that are in the group. Does that exist, Phyllis, from earlier? Contact information? Maybe not. Anyway.
It helps if I unmute when I'm answering your question. Sorry.
Thank you. Makes me feel not so slow.
The answer was that it is mainly emails that we have for people.
Right, right.
Yeah, that's all.
I would love to get that list from you, or maybe we can put it on the website or something.
Well, we
Uh,
wouldn't want to put it public because then people get all kinds
No,
of
you're right.
spam. So, yeah.
I understand that.
Yeah.
So anyway, maybe I can get a list from you someday. So I've been in New Orleans for 50 years. And before that, most of the time in the South, in North Carolina, South Carolina, 3 years further north, but that's it. So the question of schools and how they teach about race and or not has always been a puzzle to me. I've been in the school systems, mostly in New Orleans. And I'll tell you about that later, but I'm interested in reading about Texas, describing what teachers can teach. That was a bit shocking because I was in a school where as long as what I was teaching was true, and plus I was with little ones, so I didn't have a set curriculum that I had to teach. So race was a valid topic in a school as mixed as where I was. And the neat thing was we had about 40% Caucasian, 40% African American, and the rest of them were all over the world, or a blend of several ethnic backgrounds. It was really interesting to talk about the geography of it and to just be aware of the different experiences the kids I had. And kindergartners talk rather freely. So they'll tell you all kinds of things that maybe an adult would not share. But it was kind of neat to deal with all those little people. I wish I could still do it, but the body does not cooperate. So I'm interested in what your experience has been about the teaching of about slavery and race in your history. Anybody got a interest in sharing? I'm looking for fingers up. Or maybe we're going to be shy. Marva. Anybody else to get on a list? Okay. So
Jean had her finger up.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed it. Thank you, Jean. Okay, Marva, will you begin?
I'm 75 years and my remembering my school years, earlier school years, I wasn't taught about slavery itself. It was more the North and the South Civil War. I remember Lincoln freed the slaves, and that was most they touched on. They not deal with the brutality of slavery and financial gains and how the South lost its place by losing slavery. I'm to repeat a statement I heard, and I hope I don't misquote. If you don't remember your history, we are doomed to repeat it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marva. Jean.
And in many ways, we are still repeating it.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So, well, I'm 82, and I don't ever remember that we were taught much of anything that had to do other than the Spanish. For some reason, I can remember that about the Spaniards coming here, but I don't remember anything about indigenous people, that there was anything taught through high school, let alone about African Americans, even slavery. I mean, it must have been there somewhere, but I honestly do not remember. It didn't leave much of an impression.
Thank you. It's amazing what we weren't taught. Bill just informed me that Marla and Bill had their fingers up, which I did not see. And
You can put me on the list also.
yes, sir, you're on the list, Glenn. Okay, Marla, share with us.
Yeah, this was a great article. It made me think a lot about my learning experiences like we're talking about. I'm almost 50 and 22. And I grew up in Wichita, Kansas, you know, middle-sized Midwestern city. And hey, we were the North, you know, quote unquote North. So I just remember the South being demonized all of the time, that, you know, it was the South who was responsible for slavery. Like it was so whitewashed what I learned. The North, we had zero responsibility in any of this, like it's all the South's fault. So that's the primary thing that sticks out for me. As far as indigenous people go, it was, we all sat down, had a meal together, and now we're all getting along. You know, again, everything was very whitewashed and presented as that there were no difficulties. The only people of color I really distinctly remember learning about offhand, Rosa Parks, Harriet Tubman, those folks were touched on very, very briefly. And we spent more time, obviously, highlighting, you know, white men on Mount Rushmore. We did people of color, indigenous or otherwise. So that's my memory.
Thank you. When we dig down, it's amazing what's missing. I don't think I knew about Harriet Tubman or any of the women except Pocahontas. And that's pretty minimal. So, Bill.
Yes, Cindy and I watched the documentary, The Civil War, on MSNBC last night. It's a 2-hour documentary that really shows more what happened after the Civil War. And it does the same themes that Isabel Wilkinson did in her video. Ironically, people said there was an outrage in the Texas law passed that how do you present opposing views of the Holocaust? And that was a huge outrage. But there was also opposing views of slavery. And it's interesting, the outrage was more on the Holocaust, as though that was a no-brainer as to it was evil. And how could you have opposing views? But in the documentary of the Civil War, there were opposing views presented. There were opposing views of the Civil War. And there are, as we all know, there are still opposing views of the Civil War and slavery. And several white guys were quoted that said, well, we don't talk about it as the Civil War. We talk about it as the war between the states or the war of Northern aggression. And some people, white people in Mississippi, felt that their ancestors were defending their homes and their women from the Northern invasion. So it was all, there was opposing views, and sadly, that's part of the division of our country. One of the guys said, a politician said, was talking about the Confederate monuments, and this is mentioned in the trailer, which I encourage you to see. I don't see the pain in the Confederate statues. It's our heritage. And so I think sadly, there are opposing views on slavery. And this documentary presents those. Of course, it presents the ones who are defending what happened in a bad light, because most viewers know that there was absolutely a right and wrong. It was not, there was no equivalency here. Anyway, I experienced a lot of those myths growing up as a child, but I'll wait and talk about those another time.
Thank you, Bill. I think most of us, well, I don't know. If we look back at our childhood, the whole topic of race is not something that most people talk about with children, at least not in my experience. So it'd be interesting to see what you all have to say. Pedro, is your hand up to speak? And Beatrice. And Dee Dee.
And Greer has a hand up, one of those little yellow hands, since there's no image.
Yeah, I don't see it. Thank you. I will. Okay, Glenn, Greer, Beatrice. Okay. Okay. Glenn, your turn.
Okay, well, I'm 71. And, you know, people don't realize the effect.
Got you, Phyllis.
The effect it has on children when they're in school. And they're reading history, and they don't see themselves in the history. And they have no heroes. They have nothing to model behind that say that their race accomplished anything. The effect it has. When even the Indians, you know, you would see the Indians' history in the movies. You know the name of Cochise, you know, Red Cloud. You know all the great Indian warriors, you know. So, you know, but us, we participated in every war America had, all the way from the very beginning, and we are invisible in that history. So it's a crime against humanity. What was done to scar our psyche. That's all I have to say.
Well said, Glenn. Phyllis.
Ginny has her finger up.
Thank you.
I forget completely what I was going to say. No, I didn't. So I watched the video, the interview with Isabel Wilkerson that was also shared with this topic. And it really struck me what she said, that it won't be until the year, I think 2211, that there will be as much time that Black people in America have been not enslaved as they were enslaved. And no adult alive today will be alive when that happens. So that was, and part of me was like, if we survive even that long. But that was really shocking. I've never heard anybody give that kind of time frame before.
I agree.
And it was a lot of it was troubling. And all the different laws that are happening in Texas right now, I feel like they're like a template that other places are going to try to use, whether it's the anti-abortion law that's in effect now, that's horrifying, or laws, these ridiculous laws about what you can teach in school. And I feel like the goal ultimately is going to be to dumb everyone down and prevent people from being able to think critically, because they won't have been educated in a way that helps them to do that, or that hurts their little feelings that the people that look like them did bad things. So, I mean, everybody's done bad things. Some people maybe more justified than others. So yeah, I think we have a lot to work on as a country, and I'm worried. I'm worried every day. So thank you.
Thank you, Phyllis. I share some of those feelings. Jenny is on the list next. And I need fingers up.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Like Lynn, I grew up in Houston, and I think it was Marva that said, the only thing she remembers is learning that Lincoln freed the slaves, which is exactly what I remember. But as I was thinking about this, I remember we had a debate in one of my classes about apartheid. So we studied apartheid in South Africa, but we didn't study slavery in our own country. Hello. So, it sounds, and I'm 69. I mean, it sounds like everyone's had similar experience. I tried to watch the Civil War thing, Bill, but there were so many commercials. I finally, after the first hour, I'm like, I can't do this. It's like they had a commercial every 3.5 seconds, it felt like. So it looked really good, but I was just getting too irritated. And I'm hoping Pedro knows what law finally passed in Texas, because I have lost track of where things have ended up in terms of what teachers can and cannot teach, because it went through, permutations, obviously. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Bill. And Jean.
I think you've got people on the list that you haven't called on yet.
I may, and I'd love your help in figuring it out.
Well,
You said
Beatrice was just waving
Okay.
her hand, and Greer
Right.
was on the list. Oh, she's back. Greer's back on the screen. Anybody else? So Beatrice, Greer,
So
Bill.
Beatrice,
Oh, Jean,
Greer.
Jean, you got to put your finger up for longer than that. Yes,
Okay.
on
I've
the
got
screen, on the screen.
Beatrice, Green, Jean,
DD.
DD. Good. I got you, Jean.
And Marva.
Marva.
All right. Super. So, Pedro. Or did I miss somebody? Anyway, did you have a turn to speak, Pedro?
Actually, I was not on the list, but now that I am, I'm never turned down a great opportunity. I think there was a question as to when governor signed the bill. I think it was the 17th of September. I just wanted to, really, I wasn't prepared to say anything, but I thought Glenn's comments were really important.
I agree.
The invisibility of African-American history, such. Just what strikes me is, the idea of banning ideas and information. Texas never seeks to amaze me as to, what it can legislate. I also wanted to just mention for people that should become familiar with ALEC, the American Legislative, I think, Executive Council or something.
Yeah.
But it's a group, a conservative group. It's corporate funded. And that's what they do, is they create actual laws that they pass on to legislators that I'm sure are compensated in some form or fashion. But it's the most backwards and really demeaning types of laws, whether it's around abortion issues, whether it's around what you can teach in a classroom, but it actually gets codified into law. It's part of this system that that is so unfair, and it allows big money to interfere and corrupt our democratic system by using its weight to disproportionately affect laws such as the one that Governor Abbott signed on September 17th.
Thank you. Beatrice, and then Lynn, I've got you, Lynn.
Yeah, you began by asking us what our memory was of the teaching of race or racism in schools. For the most part, African-American teachers included the biographies of great African-Americans, inventors, composers, artists, and we learned them as biographies. And we learned that there were also others that were not mentioned, ever mentioned in our books, but that we came from a great people who did great things. And we were always encouraged by that. And there were pictures of Mary McLeod Bethune and George Washington Carver, and you can be a scientist and so on. So those it was through biography. Pedro was mentioning ALEC. One of their very early events was the pushing of the voter ID laws, and they would frame bills, they would write bills, as Pedro was saying, and send them around the country to legislators. And one of the legislators, I don't know what state, tried to push the bill through with Alec's byline at the top of it that showed how silly he was. My concern about this whole critical race theory, telling teachers what they can and cannot teach, is that people are putting something into law that is not existent. You know, they do not know what critical race theory is, that it's taught in law schools. It is a framework. Derek Bell, people do, it is just so disturbing to me that something that people know nothing about has become a code word for anything having to do with race and anything that might hurt white children's feelings. When on earth have we begun to determine a curriculum based on how people are going to feel? The disturbing thing about looking at the Civil War issue last night was the number of people, adults, who, because of the who, as a result of the Daughters of the Confederacy teaching their catechism about what the Civil War was, these people as adults are steeped in this, and these are their people, and the Mississippi flag that still has the stars and bars, and this legislator said, it's my flag, it's my, no understanding of how it makes other people feel. We cannot look at other people's pain, except if it's not our own. And that is disturbing. White people, I am really tired of people with this foolishness about this is my history, don't take away, don't take down my statue, because the people do not know the history, the statues that were put up at Jim Crow, the statues that were put up in places that are far away from cemeteries, which is where they need to be. Nobody's saying you can't remember, but you don't have to memorialize, you don't have to honor. And Frederick Douglass is absolutely right. There was a right side and a wrong side of that war. And the wrong side has never paid. Lincoln was so wanting to embrace and bring them back that people didn't pay. I am very, very impatient with the kind of foolishness that I hear out of the mouths of white people defending the Confederacy because they're ignorant, they do not know. And that's what these laws that the Texas people are going to do, it will make it even worse. They'll be less taught, they'll know less. It is very, very, very disturbing. And even with commercial, now remember, commercials pay for what we look at, so don't let them be, let them be. You might have to work through the commercials. Thanks, I'm sure I've gone over time, but I was on the list a long time and I kept saying, does she see me? Am I here? Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. And I'm sorry I didn't see you soon enough.
That's all right, baby.
We'll get you on again. Greer, and I don't know where Greer is.
At the top, from what I see.
You're not
next,
on my screen.
Next to Phil is Gigi.
I don't see you, but
really?
I'm glad you're here.
Okay, well, hey. Okay. Well, I feel with this, as being, I was a student in the 70s and 80s because I graduated from high school in the late 80s. And in being educated in my early years, like the civil rights movement, there was really a lot of teaching about, Black people and
Gotcha,
our
Phyllis.
part in history and what we did. I noticed as I got into school that changed. So, and we keep saying if you don't know your history, you're doomed to repeat it. Well, yeah, you are. And that's why they're doing what they're doing. You change the narrative to protect the psyches of certain people while Black people know, hey, this is what went on. I took history of the Civil War, part 1 and part 2 in college, and slavery was about 3 pages. And we're talking about a 200-page textbooks. That's how much slavery was in history of the Civil War, part 1 and part 2. And I'm talking in college, and I was in college in the 90s. They want to shape a future narrative. So the further away from source or the truth that's been augmented, then you can't even find the real truth. You're sifting through dirt to find nothing. And if you honestly look at schools weren't created to educate, especially during the industrial period when they were really like forced on people. They were created to create workers, not thinkers, workers, people who could follow instruction. And for something to be called critical race theory, when you're teaching history, it should not be theory. It should be fact. No one's in that critical race theory. Theory means, hey, it could be this, it could be that. What happened in history was facts. And that's what history should be taught as facts. That's it.
Thank you, Greer. Does anyone have experience with a teaching of history, a book, whatever, that's accurate? I'd love to find one. Appreciate any ideas you may have. Okay, Jean is on the list next, and I've got Jean, Dee Dee, Marva, Lynn, Glenn, Marla, and Phyllis. So, and Bill.
I would say that I haven't read it, but if you've read Cast, I would think that her book, would give a good, accurate rendition of our history. A couple of things, one of which is that there is a Texas lawmaker, I can't remember what he's actually running for Attorney General of the state of Texas, and he has sent out to several of the school districts a request to look at a list of 160 books to see if they've got them in their libraries or they're using them in their classroom. And they cover race, LGBT, Indigenous people, and any issue. Included in the list is the Confessions of Nat Turner by William Saroyan, and Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. And this includes books that help kids respond to bullying and others that center, LGBT characters, telling stories about the Black Lives Movement. I mean, he refuses to say why he is investigating them, what his rationale is. And some of the districts just outright refuse to comply, and others are trying to figure out what they have to deal with. They already have in place, if a parent objects to a book, they review it. And there are other things that they have to meet, the teachers have to meet if there's some complaint about a book in their school. I find it curious that I am getting emails. Yesterday, I got one from the Heritage Foundation. If anybody knows who the Heritage Foundation is, it is so conservative.
Yes.
The thing is, I'm getting some Christian, things. Well, I belong to a Catholic church in Atlanta, so they're on my website. But obviously, the white supremacists out here are panicking, and they're just trying to, but I was appalled at that.
anyway.
Thank you. Very helpful. So Dee Dee is next on our list.
One, I wasn't a teacher. I was a funeral director. And two, my parents, I was born in Chicago, which is a very segregated city even today. And my parents objected to the pattern of segregation in Chicago. And so that's why we were moved out here when I was 7. And having a good diverse environment was very, very important to my parents, and especially my mother. And so I went to high school that was out of the district, but I went there because it bordered on, it was in LA proper, but it bordered on the Japanese community and the Latin community. So we had a very, very diverse history, and we studied each of them. And we studied the internment camps during World War II. That was clearly, personally, I consider that an embarrassment in our history, because we all knew better to do that. You know, that was just totally uncalled for. And so when I read this article last night, it turned my stomach. It just made me absolutely sick that people still are willing to do this sort of thing. And just like Cindy was saying, if Texas does get away with this, it will set a model for the rest of the states. And granted, they're not going to get real far in California, but there's, you know, another 50 states, okay? There's another 49 for them to work on, you know, but it's just, it's disgusting. Our history is our history, and all of it should be taught, period. I'm not willing to bend on that at all. I'm done.
I agree. Thank you. Thank you. And I think many of us support what you're saying of teach it all.
Mm-hmm. Teach it all.
At least we'll know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dee Dee. Marva's next on the list. Thank you.
You see, Jean?
I
lost
got you on
Marva.
the list, Jean. But Marva is the next.
Here's Marva.
to speak.
Griff's hand is in her block. Raise hand.
It's not showing on my screen. I will put her on the list.
Okay.
It's not on my screen.
Okay.
Got Greer.
May I reclaim my time?
Yes, please do. I'm sorry.
I know, correct me if I'm wrong, the Texas Observatory Book Depository is a major funding of educational books. From my understanding, it's where the majority of the United States gets their educational books for public. And I have a problem with that because they control what is issued out in as educational material. And back in the past, they decided to get rid of all the negativity in the that was documented in the history of the South. can't there be multiple institutions that supply educational materials to the public schools? And why is that major supply one big supply? That's this book depository.
Interesting.
I'm looking for answers.
Anybody got answers? I will ask some people at the school where I taught. I don't know the answers, but I agree, it certainly shouldn't be one source for everybody. Everybody work on that question for Marva. Lynn is next.
Excuse me, am I on the list again? This is Greer.
Here's what I have, Greer. I have Lynn, Glenn, Marla, Phyllis, Bill, Jean, and Greer.
Oh,
Where you should be. I'm not seeing hands. I don't know what's going on with my computer, and Pedro. Do you want to be sooner, Greer?
no, I'm fine. I just wanted to make sure I was just on it.
Yeah, you're on it. Okay.
Cindy,
Lynn.
given the time, you might want to close the list after.
I think
Pedro.
I was just going to say, because there's Lynn, Glenn, Marla, Phyllis, Bill, Jean, Greer, and Pedro. Then it's closed. Okay, Lynn.
I have a few miscellaneous comments that have come to mind after listening to people. Here's a comment for you, Glenn. In Hattiesburg, there is an old Black officers club. There was money to build an officers club for Black officers, and most communities said, no, not in my neighborhood, but Hattiesburg let them build it there. And today it is a museum of African-American military, going from the Revolution up to the Vietnam War and probably the Middle Eastern wars to Iraq and all of that. So that was a surprise and a welcome surprise. Attention was paid and credit was given. Talking about ALEC, those evil people are the ones who came up with stand your ground. You can shoot somebody if after you attack them, they try to defend themselves, and you can just go ahead and kill them because you're standing your ground. And that was done in part for the gun manufacturers. I read that the Manhattan Institute, the American Enterprise Group, and the Heritage Foundation, which you just mentioned, Jean, I think, they were all instrumental in drafting language about these teaching laws, that you can't mention anything about slavery or racism or segregation or inequality, because it might hurt the feelings of, well, white students. Who else would have feelings who were hurt? So these right-wing pro-business groups are all instrumental. And I hate that the Republicans can stick together and promote the same message. Even it's an evil message and they're promoting it. Not wanting to pay taxes and help those in our country who need more help, not wanting to improve the infrastructure. And here we are trying to control the thought processes of American citizens. And the Democrats will not stick to a message. And that's why poor Biden cannot get his infrastructure plan passed, because we have some Democrats who will not stick to the message. And we hurt ourselves so much. I don't really approve of lockstep thinking, but the Republicans have it. And you can hear it on the news that every single station will use the same words. Someone said the Republicans are panicking. And that's why they're having all these laws. I don't think they're panicking. I think they're just licking their chops, thinking they're getting more and more control of our country. And here's something more that they can do. They're also, I'm sure you've heard, attending school board meetings and raising hell and making school board members fear for their lives and shutting down the meetings. And when you shut down school board meetings, the that's just a way to control them and dominate them and let people of goodwill bow out and say, I just can't do this anymore. And if I have another second left, I read an article in the Atlantic Monthly that said they're doing the same things in these evangelical churches. They're driving out their pastors who want to talk about human kindness. They're politicizing the gospel. None of this turn the other cheek or blessed are the meek and the poor. Oh no, we want make America great again in our evangelical churches. So to me, this is a sign of a group that is energized by Trump and bent on creating word fails me, not a democracy, but a authoritarian society, and they're the authority. It's horrifying. Thank you for listening.
Amen.
For sharing. I totally agree. Glenn is next. Glenn? There he is. Yes, sir.
Okay. Wow. Let me find that note I had. Yeah. Oh yeah. You know, I remember when Spike Lee wanted to make the movie Malcolm X. He couldn't get Hollywood any backers in Hollywood to back making that movie, the money. So he went to the Black community and he got it from Bill Cosby, and I think Oprah Winfrey too put in the money. And that's and that's what African Americans got to do. They got to tell their own story. They got to put up the money that's needed to tell their history. They have to be. They can't just depend on white people to tell their story. You have to tell your own story. And we definitely have, universities that are African American. So certainly there shouldn't be no excuse there why the history isn't being taught. And also we also have private schools where it should be emphasized our history. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Glenn. Marla is next on the list.
Yes, I don't have anything too profound. It's just more something that's been on my mind. And after Beatrice and someone else said something about concern about feelings, history, and it just made me think how the irony is not lost on me, and I'm sure all of y'all too, that very people who are constantly touting free speech and my freedoms, and you're impinging on my freedoms, you're going to make take all of our freedoms away, and so forth, are now the very people who've continued to try to put barriers up regarding freedom of speech and what we teach our kids and we say and the truths of everything. The conservatives who are constantly talking about truth and that they're not interested in truth at all. They're more interested in censorship.
Right. Thank you, Marla. Phyllis.
Well, I can't remember specifics about what I learned in school. I should be able to, but I do remember in junior high school in my English class, the book we used, like it started in the colonial times, and it had a poem or two by Phyllis Wheatley. And that is when I first learned about her. And she was the second famous Phyllis I ever heard of. The first one being Phyllis Diller, who was the bane of my childhood. So I was happy for Phyllis Wheatley because she had a little bit more class and gravitas, even though I did not know that word then. She and our names are spelled differently, but I remember that. I mean, I read a lot of things on my own. I read books that, youth novels about segregation and the changing of, the civil rights movement and things like that. So What I actually was taught in school isn't as front of my mind as the stuff I learned on my own. And thinking about the Confederate monuments and some people's reaction taking them down. The house where Jefferson Davis died is in New Orleans, and I could walk there from my house. And I walked over there one day and I was taking pictures of the marker that's, it's a historical marker. Some this famous person who was this, that, and the other thing died here. And a white guy comes along, sees me taking the pictures, and he's like, they're probably going to take this down next. And I laughed. I just laughed and I said, no, they're not. Like, I want to say, no, we're not, but I did not. And I don't know what he thought about my response, but I'm like, that's the difference. There's a difference between a statue that memorializes somebody who did something terrible and the place that just marks where this person of history died. That is a big difference. I really hope these laws don't catch on in other states. Let Texas just be its own thing and hopefully start electing some Democrats who will make it a better place to live for everyone there. Thank you.
Thank you, Phyllis. Bill is next. Bill Jean Greer Pedro, and then it's closed. Okay. So Bill.
Yeah, I reacted strongly to what Beatrice said, and it goes back to the dichotomy of the white settlers who took over this country. Their main thing was my rights. I have my rights. And the indigenous people, as well as other people of color, feel that I have responsibilities. And that's the basic dichotomy of it in this country, is people who want rights versus responsibilities. I saw a meme on Facebook that said, imagine being so ashamed of your past that you do not want your grandchildren to learn about it in school. And that is the thing. I actually went to junior high in Texas, and I took Texas history in junior high. And Texas history was all about the glory of the Alamo. And we did our class trip in 8th grade to I was living in Denton, to San Antonio to visit the Alamo. And there was nothing about how we stole a third of Mexico from it in a war of conquest. And the whole annexation of the northern third of Mexico is a very bad experience in our country. Ironically, it served as the practice for the Civil War. But also, I grew up with this whole myth of, I grew up in New Orleans and then in Texas and finally in New York State, of the kind of the lost cause. And this was shared by even many of my relatives were racist, but some of them weren't. And even the non-racists had this positive feeling towards the Confederate Army. And the Yankees were seen as bad people. And that extended to the baseball team by the same name. And there was family history about a young woman who was valiantly keeping her pony. And when Sherman marched through Murfreesboro, Tennessee, a foot soldier tried to get her pony, and she valiantly fought him. And an officer rode by who admired her spunk and let her keep the pony. Anyway.
Thank you for sharing. Jean?
Yes, I neglected to mention that along with the Heritage Foundation email, I could send in for a free ebook, which would explain why we should not support the critical race theory. So I don't have that in my email anymore. On a more positive note, as I was on a Zoom meeting on Wednesday with the Smithsonian, I volunteer at the African Art Museum, and the Smithsonian's really great in keeping us all informed in terms of what's going on. So the Smithsonian, all the museums, all the research centers, everything, there's a new initiative, Our Shared Future, Reckoning with Our Racial Past. There are two new museums. One's it's for women, a museum for women, and the other is the Pacific Islanders and another, but anyway, so there were 4 people there, 4 museum directors, African American history and culture, American history, and the Far East one, and also the women's. And they were talking about all of the museums are looking at how they integrate, coordinate the history with other parts of history to make the history a whole, not just, I think the African American history and culture, for those who have seen it, they've done a great job of showing. I've only been there twice and only 2 floors, but they show the totality of the history of the time. And then, but there's a lot in terms of the Far East, other places. And the whole thing is to try to integrate history so that we have a world history that's accurate. That doesn't make, it's a big, big task, but they're willing, they want to really to be a more just, more socially conscious and equitable museum worldwide.
Sounds wonderful. We're down to Greer and Pedro and we're done. So be thinking of your summary thoughts. Greer.
Okay. Yeah, and I've been listening to what different people have said, and yes, I feel that white people are attached to their history very emotionally, because I remember when Jackie Clarkson, she was one of our councilwomen, she was like, after Katrina, she was at a meeting and she stood up and said, I want to bring back New Orleans like back in the good old days in the 50s. So all the Black residents were like, the hell you do? Because if you think about it, the 50s Black people were a hell of a lot different from white people. And then with the teaching of true history, you have soldiers who liberated the concentration camps, who saw what was done to people. And people have this concept of it didn't exist when we were there. That's because it's not being taught. And the people who kill me the most are these young fools they're so about their history. Yeah, my grandfather fought in World War II, but you're standing holding a Nazi flag. See, all that emotion is not linked to truth. How can you hold up a flag that tried to kill your grandfather? We got to take the emotion out of history and teach the facts of what happened. And like my Uncle Glenn said, we have to teach our kids. We can never expect an oppressor to teach us what we need to know about ourselves. That just makes no sense whatever. And I'm going to end it. I teacher, she was another emotional white woman. We were reading To Kill a Mockingbird. And she was engrossed in Atticus Finch, like the best thing ever. She was like, oh yeah, because he was about right and he was about helping Black people and all that. And I had to say, excuse me, Atticus Finch was as racist as everybody in that town. He was the only man unaffected by it. And she was like, well, why would you say that? I said, Atticus Finch was about being right about the law. It wasn't anything about whether that man he was defending was Black or white. But when those townsmen were crossing across the tracks to where his maid Calpurnia stayed, he told her to stay here with my kids. He didn't worry about whether she had family or needed to get to them. See, that emotion takes away from your genuineness when we're dealing with facts. That's it.
Thank you. Worth thinking about, yes. Pedro, and that's the last name on the list. So,
Yeah, yeah, thank you for that, Gigi. I had just a couple of comments. Getting back to the article, there was a quote that the advent of slavery in America could not be taught as representing the true founding of the United States, but rather a deviation from American principles according to the bill. So this is a form of rewriting history. You know,
yes,
as
censorship.
as children, you know, and this might be a white privilege thing, I'm not sure, but I can remember, you know, these fables, you know, where they live happily ever after, where the good always prevails over the bad. All of these things we want to be right, and they should be right, and they could be right, because we could make them right if we retook the power that's rightfully ours. But they're not. And this fable that, you know, America first, or that's kind of connected to that Trumpism type stuff, and is part of this deal. I also just wanted to say that I think what Beatrice said in some of her words earlier today, I think are really important, that you cannot look at other people's pain unless it's our own. This is what we've been socialized to be in our alienating culture. And I don't mean to sound negative, but our humanity just seems to be socialized out of us. It's a me kind of issue, us against them. You know, you're called a hater if you bring this type of stuff up, rather than addressing the inequities or the integrity of the comment being made, whether it's truthfulness or not. You divert from the problem by just simply saying you are a hater. And lastly, the people that so overwhelmingly are the elite and own the overwhelming wealth of the world, they're the ones that create this informational environment. So as somebody was mentioning, getting Carnegie emails and these types of things, that's just one part of this overwhelm of information that socializes us further into ignorance that needs to be turned around. And sorry for going over my time. I'll just go ahead and sacrifice my 1 minute wrap up. So thank you all very much for very compelling discussions today.
Thank you, Pedro, and everybody. I think you figured out that I'm not doing the timing very carefully, because I figured almost everybody was in the middle of a sentence of a valuable idea. And I figured nobody is being too verbose, and I just let it be. Everybody except Kate, Charlotte and Jim, and Leonetta spoke that I can see. So they can do a wrap up a little longer, 2 minutes, and everybody else will have 1 minute. And then we'll put it to bed for another week. I'm interested, Jenny listed a book, and I'd like it when it's your turn to tell us a little more about Stamped from the Beginning. It sounds interesting. Okay, so Phyllis, you want to start a wrap up? No, let's do the 2 minute ones first. How about Kate, Jim and his wife, and Leonetta? Would you give us 2 minutes evaluation or wrap up? I don't
Okay.
care.
I was educated in the New Orleans school system when it was segregated. And elementary school, of course, we didn't touch on history very much. And then when I got to high school, we had US history. We briefly touched on slavery. But then when I got to college, again, I had another US history course. And in that course, we found out that Lincoln did not want to free slaves. He was, if I'm not mistaken, he was Republican. He did not want to free slaves, but he couldn't find a way to keep the Union together without doing it, because every time a new territory came to be a state, they would gerrymander and people would move into the territory that were pro-slavery to make the state a slave state instead of a free state. And they've been gerrymandering since what was that, 1860s, and they're still doing it today. I think we have these huge conglomerates that own large corporations that control a lot of what we hear and what we see. And I think we lost a lot of the laws that were put in place to keep that from happening. It was a great discussion today, and thanks everybody for your thoughts.
Thank you, Kate. How about Charlotte and Jim? Some thoughts?
Thank you very much. Charlotte had to step away. I grew up in the northern part of Michigan, and there were no African Americans there. And as you might imagine, there was no history taught about anything about that. I subsequently went on to different places. But one story I want to relate to you is when I was in Baltimore in training, I took over the practice of a physician on the Eastern Shore of Maryland.
Ooh.
The Eastern Shore of Maryland is deep south.
Yeah.
And the first night I got there, I received a call saying that this young man's mother needed to have the physician deliver the baby. And the young man and I said, well, where are you? And he said, I'm in Queen Annesville. Now, outside of every city in the Eastern Shore was a ville that was where the Black community was. And I said, where is that? And the young man, I could just see him turn away from the phone and talk to his mother and said, this man doesn't even know where Queen Annesville is. All I want to say is metaphorically, I'm still looking for Queen Annesville. And this group here, as well as the one that I participate with, be in Atlanta, has helped greatly in that trip. Thank you very much for all of your input today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Super. Leonetta.
This was a wonderful topic. In elementary school, I went to an all-Black Catholic school, and we taught what I can remember about the history. We were taught a lot about the kings and the queens and that kind of history. And but we also had the pictures and about Carter T. Woods and the man with the peanuts. Help me. What was his name?
Schultz.
Yes. And Malcolm X and Frederick Douglass had all those pictures in my classrooms at this all-Black Catholic school. When I got into high school, I went to Chappelle. People from New Orleans remember that. I was one of two Black girls in my class of 320. In my senior year, I asked to put up a display for Black History Month. They told me I could do it. And I saw some of my classmates, not classmates, some of the girls in the school actually looking at the things that I put up. And I had pictures of slavery. I found pictures of Blacks being whipped. That picture that I talked about several weeks ago about the Black man who had all those whip marks on his back, and they had healed, and they were put up. I put those pictures up, and I think I made an impression on the girls in the school. I didn't hear anything bad about it, but I did it. Then I went to college, and that's where I really got the Black history. I took Louisiana history, a lot about how the Spanish and the French treated Black people and the Native people. I got to learn about that history. And then once I became a social worker and joined the Black Social Workers Organization, I really learned a lot about my history. I also want to add about I've started to look into the school board meetings on the state level too, and I don't know how this is going to happen. I know this is let me get my thoughts together. Education is being politicized by the some white politicians because they're buying into this fact that in 20 years, whites are going to be the minority and they're trying to hold on to power. It's all about holding on to power. But my thing is, America needs to wake up. Our enemies are looking at this. They may be even a part of this plot of this division. And if we keep on the way we're doing, we're gonna be invaded. And this is just how I feel. And all of this foolishness is not gonna matter because we're gonna be under somebody else's control. Is that my time up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. So everybody else has a minute to wrap up. And then we'll call it a day. Would you start with Phyllis, please?
Thanks. This was a good article and the video that was shared as well, and the conversation and the ideas and thoughts everybody shared. I really appreciate very much. Thank you.
Dee Dee?
I've enjoyed the discussion. The article and the video were eye-opening, and like I shared before, they were also nauseating. My question is, and I liked Cindy's comment, my question is, where do we go from here? What do we do personally to change our world? You know, I like when Cindy said I would probably get fired. And I know I would get fired. And I know that I would collect unemployment and make them pay it because I spoke out and did the right thing. And we need to think about what we can do other than being in this meeting. We need to figure out what we can do. You know, each person makes a little contribution. Put a bunch of little contributions together, you got a big one.
Yes.
And so what can we do? I'm done.
Well said. Well said. Lynn?
I don't remember too much teaching about slavery in school. I'm 75 and went to all segregated schools in Houston, but we did receive bulletins from Scholastic books. They sold paperbacks to school children. You would bring the little folder home and pick out your books. And they had a large number of books about the civil rights movement that was going on around me at that time. And I bought a lot of the books and learned a lot and became aware of social justice. So my hope is that children of America will not let their school boards shut down their minds. They will seek knowledge and seek change.
Yes. Thank you, Lynn. Bill?
Mute is. So one of the things that I learned from the documentary, The Civil War, was that Lincoln initially resisted using Black soldiers to fight for the Union. And then he realized that he couldn't win the war without Black soldiers. So he started using it, and 150,000 Black troops fought for the Union. And that was the turning point in the war. And we don't hear that anywhere. And it's ironic that in the Virginia governor's race, the Republican who has nothing positive to say, his closing ad is about banning a book by Toni Morrison, who won a Nobel and Pulitzer Prize. And that's his closing argument. And he said Terry McAuliffe vetoed the bill that would have banned that book. So vote against him. So there's so much more I could say on this, but I think my minute's up. So thanks for everybody. Again, I learned a lot.
Thank you, Bill. Marva.
Thank you for such an amazing article and discussion, Cindy. I'm 75, and I learned about the Tuskegee Airmen when my children was in high school. They should have ticker tape parades in New York, parading the Tuskegee Airmen, how good they were, how they say they were a part of strategic in the sky in the winning of World War II, I think. Was no parade. I love parades, and there were no parade until my children graduated out of high school, acknowledging the Tuskegee Airmen. They were amazing. They were heroes that were kept in hiding from our children being proud of the Black heroes. Thank you.
Thank you, Marva. Pedro.
Hey, so what a great conversation once again. I just wanted to, it's kind of off the path a little bit, but there's so much distrust that's rightfully been generated over history for white people's version of history and that type of thing. But, you know, I've heard African Americans speak on issues, some African Americans that are very conservative and way off the reservation, so to speak, of the truth type of thing. And I think that, you know, ideas are more powerful than arms. I think that I think what Malcolm X came to realize is that oppressors can come in all colors, although overwhelmingly it's been, you know, white oppression and such. But I guess what I'm trying to speak to is just the issue of examining ideas on the basis of their merit and the distrust for the history that's always been presented is so well founded, but that does not mean that there are not some Anglo writers that speak truth to power as well. And then lastly, I just wanted to also indicate I'm interested if people are in getting an email list of everybody. I have a radio show in Austin that I'd like to invite people to check out from time to time, but I don't know how to reach you all. Anyhow, thank you for the very stimulating discussion today.
Thank you, Pedro. Beatrice.
Thanks, everyone, for the conversation. Couple of thoughts. First of all, my dad's brother was a Tuskegee Airman, so we all knew about Tuskegee Airmen. We're awfully proud of him. The Heritage Foundation has written a definition of critical race theory, which they have spread their lie throughout everywhere. I was disturbed by a young man in the Civil War documentary toward the end who said Asians had a hard time, but they were all right. And so because people do not know the history of African people in this country from the beginning of enslavement through Reconstruction, Jim Crow, people are able to just make little comparisons. Well, these people are doing fine. That's really disturbing. We can tell our own stories, and I agree with what Glenn, I'm gonna call you Uncle Glenn, is saying. We can tell our own stories to ourselves and encourage one another, but that doesn't get the story far enough. You can't. We just can't allow people to be erased from history or people's stories to be mistold. Finally, whenever I take my students to the public library, and I always, as a teacher, I think I've said this before, I never let a kid leave me without getting a public library card. Many would go straight to biography. They love biography because they like to know what was that person like as a child. So slave narratives, biography, all of this are ways of instructing children on what people's lives were. And it's just unfortunate that people are dealing with books. I feel kind of discouraged when you see what people are trying to do in schools with school boards against teachers, it's very, very concerning. And I'm trying not to feel like we are lost. But when you listen to the foolishness and you see something codified in a law, it just sometimes want to throw your hands up. But because you all are here, we remain encouraged. Thanks.
Don't move to Texas.
No, I'm all right with Georgia, but that tomahawk chop thing has to go. That has to go.
I agree. Jean? Change your mute. Unmute. Jean, we can't hear you. There you go. But not.
My auto, good. I'm sorry. I'm getting old and feeble, I think. I appreciate everybody's comments. At the moment, I'm feeling a little low, but I think that whenever we see anything that is not right, we should stand up for what is right and stand behind that. If we can get involved in politics or making sure that none of our schools are subjected to these kinds of restrictions. There's so much that needs to be done at this point in time in this world. It's hard to say where to go, but it helps to share our thoughts, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Jean. Ginny.
Yeah, before I forget, the book is stamped from the beginning. It's by Ibram Kendi.
Okay.
And it's the definitive history of racist ideas in America. True confession, I haven't finished it because it's like 500 pages, but if y'all read it, you can, summarize it for the rest of us. Great discussion. Thank you. And on an up note, I think, and we'll see if Pedro agrees, there's a strong contender probably going to run against our governor and a couple of fairly strong ones against our lieutenant governor. So cross your fingers. And my takeaway is always the same. It's like, what do I do? Which I know a couple of people have brought up, but thank you very much for this discussion. It was rich.
Thank you. Marla.
Yep, great question. And I just have one final on my personal education, and I'd forgotten to talk briefly before. A huge shout out and thank you to a phenomenal class I took in college. My first undergraduate degree was political science, and I took a history of Africa 1 and 2 from a professor who was South African, and it was phenomenal to learn true history, speaking truths, and we could all speak freely and just hearing and elevating other voices. So that was probably my first real impactful learning experience when it came to people of color in history. Anyway, thank you all, as always, wonderful discussion. Hope you have a great weekend and a wonderful week.
Thank you, everybody, for your input. I think we all have our own personal lifetime.
Cindy, you've got Glenn and Greer left.
You know what? They're not on my screen. Thank you.
Huh.
They haven't been on my screen the whole time. Glenn, yes.
Okay,
And
yeah.
then Greer. I would
Yeah,
never
and,
leave you out, Glenn.
all right, thank you. In Christianity, they say there's a, and this time we're living in is a war of Armageddon, which the good forces will be fighting against the evil forces. And although we may not see it, the good forces, but they are forces working against what is going wrong in this country and what's going wrong in the world. In Islam, this Holy Quran tells us to stand up for what is right and forbid what is wrong. So if we look at history, no matter how overwhelming the evil looks, it has always been overcome. And that's what we have to have that faith, and don't just listen to the loud mouths, the people who's making all the loud noises, and just remember and stick to your faith. That's it.
Thank you. And Greer, wrap it up for us.
I'm just gonna leave it with this: until all history that contributed to the establishment of America is told, this country is never gonna be as great as it can be. That's it. Everybody's history should be American history.
Absolutely. I'm excited that this brought so many ideas in. That we would have enough time to really pursue all the individual threads. But we can each do our own reading. And I would love to see about a reading list that we could put together down the road. I don't know logistically how to do that, but maybe we can. Thank you for your energy, for your thoughts. And I wanted to close with an experience that I had for many, many years in starting a year of kindergartners, say 4, almost 5 or early 5s. After we were, and this was in a very mixed school with quite a lot of foreign kids and mixed kids. We would do an exercise when I first heard any mention of color or race or whatever. And we'd sit in a circle, everybody put their hands into the middle. So you've got this row of all these little hands, and they're always a little wiggly. We did first the naming of all the different shades. And I was astonished how many colors for the blends there were. It was really exciting to see how much they could invent names for the different skin tones. And then we talked about, and some kid always said, hey, they're all the same, they're all hands. And they could do good things and they could do bad things, and it depends on the person. So the awareness of we're all the same, but we're all different. And they're all good was always a good way to start a new year. And hopefully a long-term career of school, being in school was a good, I got lucky. So thank you for your efforts today, everybody. And anyone that has ideas of how we can compile a reading list and a contact list, I would love to see if we can do that. Thanks very much.